Now we're going to start to do some exciting things. We're going to start the advanced lateral exercises. And I have my friend who wrote Ziggy, I have my friend Melissa McLaren back, and she's on Valentino, and he's a thoroughbred, and he's one of our senior citizens. He's, well, I won't divulge exactly how old he is, but he's well over 20. And he's a thoroughbred, like I said, so you're seeing another breed, and that's great. So I want to just talk a little bit about the advanced lateral exercises. If you remember from our session on leg yielding, that as a heading, when I said lateral exercises, I'm talking about exercises where the horse goes sideways, forward and sideways as well. And on one side of our column with the heading lateral exercises, I had turn on the forehand and leg yielding. Now in this column, the advanced lateral exercises, we have things like we're going to do today: shoulder in, haunches in, half pass, turns on the haunches. And the main difference between those two categories of lateral exercises can be summed up in one word, and that word is bend. And just think of it like a mathematical formula. When you bend a horse, plus you go sideways, actually I should do it this way, bend plus sideways equals, and a little equal sign, engagement. And you know from the other sessions that the word engagement refers to the bending of the joints of the hind legs. So these advanced lateral exercises are one of the categories of exercises that we use to collect the horse. And if you need a little refresher course on collection, which is our 6th ingredient in the training scale, go back to that session on collection. And we've talked about 4 different categories of exercises that do collect the horse. You've seen in that session on collection, collecting half halts. We also talked about decreasing size circles. In other words, by virtue of the arc of a circle getting tighter and tighter, we demand more engagement of the inside hind leg. We've also talked about frequent transition skipping a gait: 5 strides canter, 5 strides walk, 5 strides canter, 5 strides walk, collect a horse, or 5 or 6 strides trot, halt, 5 or 6 strides trot, halt, with no dribbly walk steps in between. Doing frequent transition skipping a gait also moves that center of gravity toward the hind legs and gets the horse off the forehand. But now we have this whole category of exercises. Are you paying attention, Val? That are lateral exercises with a bend that also collect the horse. I want to just briefly make a point about that. We don't do these exercises just because we're sick and tired of going on a 20-meter circle and we want to do something fancy. There's a purpose, and one of the purposes of all these advanced lateral exercises is collection, loading the hind legs, lowering the croup so the forehand can come lighter and freer. So we're going to start with the father of all the advanced lateral exercises, and that's shoulder in. That's the first advanced lateral exercise that you should be doing with your horse. And there are so many benefits to shoulder in. I'll just mention a few of them. Shoulder in supples and loosens the shoulders and the forearm of the horse as that front leg has to cross over and in front of the other front leg. Shoulder in, and any form of shoulder in, such as shoulder fore, F-O-R-E, which is half the angle of a shoulder in, is the way that we straighten the horse. We always straighten the crooked horse, and horses express their crookedness by carrying their hindquarters to the inside. We never push the hindquarters back out. We always straighten the horse by bringing the shoulders in front of the inside hind legs. So we use shoulder fore or shoulder in to straighten the horse. And as I said before, it's a collecting exercise because by virtue of the bend, while you're going sideways, every step the horse takes in shoulder in, he steps under the heavy point of his body and he has to lower his inside hip. And did you get stung by a bee? As he lowers his inside hip, the croup goes down and the forehand comes up. Now, a lot of times people will say to me, well, when am I ready to start doing shoulder in? And the answer to that, and for all the advanced lateral exercises, is when you can do a 10-meter circle. And maybe your horse can only do a 10-meter circle right now in the walk, but if he can negotiate a 10-meter circle in the walk, then you could start these exercises in the walk. If he can do a 10-meter circle in the trot, you can do them in the trot. And what I mean by negotiate a circle is that his spine directly overlaps the line of the circle, and he doesn't cheat and lose his bend by swinging his hindquarters out. And we're going to demonstrate that in a second, but I just want to give you an overview of what the horse will be doing in shoulder in. He has to have a bend through his body equal to the bend of a 10-meter circle, and we bring his forehand to a 30-degree angle off the rail. Now, the way to visualize that, you know, a right angle is 90 degrees. Half of a right angle is 45 degrees. So 15 degrees less than that is 30 degrees. When you bring your horse's forehand 30 degrees off the track, you put the horse on what's called 3 tracks. In other words, if Val were doing he's in a pretty good position right now. He's actually in right, don't do anything, right shoulder 4. Okay, take half a step there. Perfect. Okay, so he's almost in right shoulder in right now in terms of angle. You can see that his left hind leg makes a separate track. He's almost got his right hind leg lined up directly behind the left foreleg. That makes a second track, and the third track is made by the right front leg all by itself. When these two legs, in this case the left fore and right hind, are lined up, you have the shoulders 30 degrees off the track. So you need to have bend first, then angle. 10-meter bend, then 30-degree angle. And so it's pretty, therefore, self-explanatory what the aids would be. If you're bending on a 10-meter circle, let's say we're going to the right, your weight would be on your inside seat bone, your right seat bone. Your right leg would be on the girth as a pole for the horse to bend around. Your left leg would be behind the girth a little bit to curve the back end of the horse around your inside leg. You would turn the key in the lock with the inside rein to ask for a +1 flexion to the right, but you support with the outside rein so that you don't get more bend in the neck than the rest of the body. So those are your bending aids. Now, how do we ask for angle, Val? The way we ask for angle is we use the two hands as a unit. And if we want to move the shoulders to the right, we bring the two arms to the right. You practice that for me. Yeah. And then if you want to bring the shoulders to the left, you bring your two arms perfect to the left. Now notice what she's doing. She's keeping her hands equidistant from her body. It's normal, I'm going to do it wrong now, that people, when they, let's say, want to bring the shoulders to the left, they bring one hand closer to their body than the other. But if you do that, you tip the horse over on his shoulders. So on a plane that's lateral plane that's equidistant from your body, two arms to the left, two arms to the right. One way I like to think about it, let's say I'm doing right shoulder in. I'm going to be using an opening right rein. So I think right hand to the right of my right hip so that I know that I bring my hand in that direction. And then the left hand comes to the same degree over and comes as close to the withers as possible, but of course it never crosses over. So those are the aids for the shoulder in. Now, once again, I want to get back to people thinking that this is a really complicated thing to do. If you can go on a 10-meter circle, then you can start shoulder in, because all shoulder in is the first step of a 10-meter circle that we then interrupt and continue down the long side with that 10-meter bend. But that's the key thing. We need to know that the horse is maintaining his bend. Otherwise, he's just doing a leg yield in a shoulder in position, which is fine if you want to do a leg yield as a loosening, stretching, kind of toe-touching exercise. But if your goal is, for example, collecting the horse, engaging the hind end, lowering the croup, he's got to bend. So how do we know? What you're going to do when we start to do this exercise is you're going to look at just the back end of the horse. You're going to pretend that something has blocked your vision and you can't see Melissa and you can't see the front end. And if all you could see was Val's hindquarters, you would not have enough information from just looking at his hindquarters to know if he was just going straight down the track or if he were bending through his body and in shoulder in, because here's the key. The position of the hindquarters when he's going straight is identical to the position of the hindquarters when he's in shoulder in. If he loses his bend, you'll see his hindquarters swing out a little bit, and then his hindquarters will be at an angle to the rail. So Melissa, what we're going to do, because I want to sort of see that from the back, head off to the right there and do a 10-meter circle at R, just in the walk. And I'll talk you through all the bending aids and everything. So you'll do a couple of 10-meter circles. So she's going to go from R to the center line and back to R, and she's just going to live on that circle to see if Val can negotiate a 10-meter circle without cheating. You can come, I'll step back a little bit so you can come just to the inside of me. Perfect. Good. Not too much bend in the neck. Remember, the bend should be equal from pole to tail. There you go. Good. So I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to go over the bending aids. She thinks to herself while she's on the circle, weight on my inside seat bone, inner leg on the girth, outer leg behind the girth, little turn of the key with her right wrist so he looks a little bit to the inside, but a little more supporting with the left rein so we don't have too much bend in the neck. Now I'd like you to attempt to halt on the first step of that 10-meter circle so that you're in shoulder in. You halt in a shoulder in position. Okay, that was a great mistake. Okay, so here's what I want you to see from that, is that you can see that his hindquarters are at an angle to the rail. So if Melissa were to continue down the long side on 3 tracks with his hindquarters at an angle to the rail, he would only be doing a leg yield and shoulder in position. He would not be doing an exercise that would bend the joints of the hind legs. So you need to be, if you don't have a ground person, you need to have a way to evaluate whether your horse is cheating and evading the difficulty of the movement by swinging his hindquarters out. And it's sort of not real fair to Val. I can see why he would do that because, as I said, he's an older horse and he's been standing for a long time and we haven't even actually done any warm-up. But what I would like you to do now is do another 10-meter circle, and this time in the walk, just continue down the long side in the shoulder in, because it might be a little bit easier for you to keep his hindquarters parallel to the rail when you do that. So just think I'm starting the first step of a 10-meter circle, and don't bring the forehand too much off the track. Good. And look up, you look down the long side. This is the one exercise you do that you don't look good between the horse's ears. That's good, Melissa. The horse looks a little to the inside, the rider looks straight down the ears. Keep your angle consistent. He's in shoulder 4 now, so you need a hair more angle with, yeah, right there. And look at the hindquarters, okay? They are basically parallel to the rail. Now straighten them before the corner. We always want to do a good transition before the corner. Very good. And now do a little exercise for me to help you feel where his hindquarters are. Go straight. Go straight for like 4 or 5 steps, then do 4 or 5 steps shoulder in, then 4 or 5 steps straight. Good, that's lovely. And now straight. And what you should feel as you do this exercise is, now his haunches are swinging out because you had a little bit too much angle, is do his haunches stay in the exact same position, whether I'm straight like this or, good, perfect, and then straight again. Or I lead the shoulders to the inside. This is a good way for you to get this feeling that the horse is bending through his rib cage, because the position of the hind legs should stay identical, whether you're just on a straight line or whether you're going on your 2 tracks. Now the other thing to think about is your angle. I had to make a couple of corrections for Melissa. Just halt there for a second. There are a couple ways that you can tell that you have enough angle but not too much. One thing that I like to do is, although this arena is very nice with the footing, but most rings have a little gully in the track. And if you visualize, if you think about riding his hind legs like they are now, just straight in the gully, and you think about taking his outside front leg and placing it on the inside lip of the track where someone hasn't raked it in, then you'll be on 3 tracks. And so if you keep your head up, but you peek down the end of your nose, and every step that he takes with his left front leg, he steps on the inner lip of the track, he steps on the inner lip of the track, he steps on the inner lip of the track. Now, the other thing that happened in the first attempt is you started off really, really well, and then he brought his shoulders a little bit back toward the rail, and then you made a correction. So your angle varied. One of the other things that I like to do as a good image once I'm in the 3-track shoulder in is I take my outside knee and I line it up at a point somewhere on the short side. And I pretend that there's like a fisherman that's hooked my knee and they're reeling me in, and there's a straight line from my outside knee to the point on the rail, and that's another way to help you keep your angle consistent. So in a second we're going to work on that. We're going to try that in the trot, but we need to take a little break here so that Val can warm up because he's been standing and just walking, and he needs to warm up and loosen up a little bit in the working trot before we try that. In the working trot before we try the shoulder in the trot. So we're going to take a little break. So now Val is having a little opportunity to warm up, and we're going to look at the shoulder in the trot. And so go down to the far end, make a 10-meter circle by F, and go over your bending aids in your mind. Weight on the inside seat bone, inner leg on the girth, that's a good frame right there, outer leg behind the girth. Flexion to the inside, outside rein limits the amount of bend in the neck. Keep this bend, pretend you're on the first step of a 10-meter circle and your inner leg drives him down the track. Just a hair more angle for 30 degrees, pretty darn good. Good. Now give him a little kick with your left leg because he's avoiding the bending of the joints of the inside hind leg by drifting to the inside. Next time around, turn before M. Come again with your shoulder in, and I want everybody to look at the horse's hindquarters. Beautiful. Do the hindquarters, very nice. Do the hindquarters stay parallel to the rail. Well done you. And straighten him. Let him relax his muscles. Try once more. Bend him in the corner. Ride every corner as if it's a quarter of a 10-meter circle. Keep the bend. Be ready with your inner leg so that you engage his inside hind. Good. Outside foreleg on the inner lip of the track. Hair more angle, you're in shoulder 4 there. Just a hair more angle. There, there. And walk. Good, Melissa, that was great. So Melissa's going to take a little break. And we're going to talk about common mistakes that people make in shoulder in, and Melissa's going to be a good demo rider and demonstrate some mistakes that people make. And so some of the mistakes you saw with Val, that in an effort to avoid the engagement of his left hind leg, he wanted to drift a little bit to the inside of the rail. And when the horse does that, that's a horse thing. He's trying to make things easier for himself. So Melissa became active with her inner leg to tell him to bend the joints of his inside hind leg. That's a horse thing. Most of the mistakes that we're going to demonstrate are rider things. So you need to know what things you could be doing wrong so that you know how to correct them. One of the first very common rider mistakes that people make is that it's not that the horse is trying to avoid the engagement by putting his hindquarters at an angle to the rail, but stop here like sideways for a second. But the rider makes the mistake by, rather than leaving, if she were doing left shoulder in like she just was, rather than leaving her left leg forward on the girth, the rider draws the inner leg back. And as a result, if the horse is an obedient horse, he leg yields with the hindquarters away from that leg. He puts his hindquarters out. So it's very important that the rider keeps the inside leg on the girth. Now, I want you to do that wrong. You can either do it in the walk or do it in the trot, but go to the left again and come out of the corner and draw your left leg back so that Val ends up swinging his hindquarters out. And then we'll arc onto a circle, and then you'll keep your inner leg on the girth and do a few steps of shoulder in with your inner leg on the girth. But let's show it wrong, and then use the circle to get your legs reorganized, and then we'll show it right. And Melissa, when you use the ring, just like turn about here so that we can get the whole horse in the camera. Bring your left leg even a little. Yeah, you have to be bad, Melissa, bad. There you go. Now you can see that her left leg is back and Val's haunches are at an angle to the rail. This is a very, very common rider mistake. Now go on a 10-meter circle, get your legs reorganized so that your inner leg is on the girth, the outer leg is behind the girth. A little more flexion by turning your left wrist like you're unlocking a door. And then your two arms will come to the left as your inner leg drives the hind leg straight down the track, but your inner leg stays forward. So this is the first step of the 10-meter circle. Good. And you can see that the haunches are now parallel to the rail. Good job. Okay, come on back here. Just turn. Come down the center line. Now, another common mistake that riders make is not that they bring the inside leg back, which leg yields the hindquarters out, but they take their outside leg off. They're not keeping the horse wrapped up in between the two legs with the inner leg on the girth and the outer leg behind the girth. So let's say you were still going to the left like that. You can take your leg off like that, which sort of opens a door for his hindquarters to swing out. So we're going to see the same mistake, but with his hindquarters at an angle to the rail, but we're going to see it as a result of your outside leg not being behind the girth, and this is a terrible word, but I'm going to use it, trapping the outside hind leg. It's not in a guarding position to prevent the hind leg from swinging out. It's off the horse, or sometimes the leg is forward. And as a result of that, you've given the hindquarters an escape route. Okay, so let's just do that. You can turn right there. And you're going to start your shoulder in the walk, but you're going to take your outer leg off or forward or both, so that he has an escape route for his hindquarters, which he says, oh, yippee, I don't have to bend the joints of my hind legs. You can exaggerate that just a little bit more. That's right. Add a little more angle so that there we go. Good. I know it's hard for you to see the her outside leg, but come on back, Melissa. The look of the horse with the hindquarters at an angle to the rail is going to look the same as if she had brought her inside leg back and leg yielded the hindquarters out. So here's a simple correction for that, to make sure that the rider has that outside leg back and on. What I want you to do is just walk down the long side in a little bit of haunches in. And later on in another session, you'll see the relationship between shoulder in and haunches in, how closely related they are. So when she's in haunches in, she has to have her right leg on and back. Now keep your, not any more angle than that, that's fine. Keep your outer leg there and swivel into shoulder in. Keep your two legs in the same position. Two arms, yeah, good. And keep them on the track and back to haunches in. So just go back and forth. Good. And back to shoulder in. Good job. Not too much angle. You see, at an angle greater than 30 degrees, it's impossible for the horse to bend, and then he also turns it into a leg yield. Do it on that long side. Same thing. And this time, Melissa, when you go into shoulder in, a little less angle, because you're asking for a little bit more than 30 degrees. So haunches in, keeping your outside leg, feeling it on his barrel, perfect. And now just barely bringing the forehand in, slide him, good, as if he's on the first step of a 10-meter circle, and back to haunches in. Keeping the same bend and the same angle. And back to shoulder in. Super. Good. Good. And then you can bring him over here again. So usually, if there's a mistake in not having the bend, more often than not, it's the rider not keeping the inside leg on the girth. It's the rider that's sliding the inside leg behind the girth. But sometimes it's that the outside leg comes off or forward. So starting the shoulder in from a little bit of a haunches in position puts you in a position where you have to have that outside leg on and back. And then you can slide from your haunches in into your shoulder in, haunches in into your shoulder in, and feel that your legs and your seat bone stays exactly the same, because what you'll find out later is basically they're the same exercise. Shoulder in is the first step of a 10-meter circle, continued on a straight line. Haunches in is the last step of a 10-meter circle, continued on a straight line. Now let me talk about another common mistake that riders make. And that is, rather than using an opening inside rein and bringing the two arms in the direction that they want the horse to go, they use an indirect inside rein. And what we generally end up with an indirect rein is we end up with a head and neck to the inside and the shoulder being glued to the wall. So we're just going to let him go to the right for a second, and rather than bringing your two arms to the right to lead the shoulder to the right, you're going to use an indirect right rein so that your right hand is going in that direction. And what we're going to see is that you're going to overbend his neck on purpose. You're going to overbend his neck, and the rest of his body from here back is just going to go straight down the long side as if you're just tracking straight. Okay, so she's like, wow, this is a really weird lesson. This is a very common mistake. So all four of his legs will stay straight on the track. Good. That's really crummy. Perfect. That's just what I wanted. Very good. So this is what I also see a lot of. Bend in the neck, shoulder falling out. We have what's called a head and neck in, not a shoulder in. Turn there, Melissa, so that people can see that coming toward the camera. Do it on the next long side. Straight, let him relax and straighten on there. But do the exact same thing you just did. So she uses an indirect right rein instead of an opening right rein. She overbends the neck to the inside, but the shoulders stay on the track. They don't come in. So turn there and halt for a second. One of the exercises that I do to help riders get the feel of having control over the shoulders so that they can bring them in, even though I know that the flexion is incorrect and obviously the horse can't really bend the way we want. But if you're doing something like you just saw and you don't have control over the shoulders, particularly when you ride with the hollow side of the horse to the inside, what I want you to do is ride in a -1 flexion, counter flexion, so that the face of the horse is 1 inch to the inside of a neutral position. Then in counterflexion, you're going to bring the two arms to the inside. Now what I would like you to try to do is do it wrong first, like do what you just did with the overbend in the neck to the inside and the shoulder popped out, and then from that position carefully do your -1 flexion and then lead his shoulders in. So you're going to do it wrong and then you're going to make the correction. Okay, so let's give that a shot. So first she's going to do a common rider mistake, which is to do a head and neck in because she's using an indirect inside rein. Keep his front legs on the track. There you go. Good. Now carefully counterflex him. Good. And then keeping him in counterflexion and your inner leg on, bring the two arms to the... Beautiful. Good. Good. Perfect. Now straighten him. Turn across the school at P and do those two things again. Do it wrong and do the correction. So I know that the flexion is incorrect for shoulder in, and I know the horse really can't bend. But this correction is for the rider that tends to use an indirect inside rein and she gets a head and neck in, so that the rider can learn the feeling. Good. can learn the feeling of controlling the shoulders. So here's the head and neck in. Now she's going to carefully flex to the left and 2 arms to the right in counterflexion to lead the shoulders in. A little bit more, lead the shoulders. There, good girl. Good girl. Good. Super. Awesome correction. You want to try that once in the trot? Sure. So do it wrong first and then make the correction. So over bending the neck to the inside. Good. Keep your inner leg on. That's right. More bend in the neck. Now counter flex and lead the forehand in. 2 arms to the right. Okay, that was a shoulder 4. Try it again, and when you make the correction, bring your shoulders in more. Do it wrong. Good. Counter flex and keep his shoulders in the same spot. Opening. Right rein, right hand to the right. There you go. There you go. There you go. Well done. And walk. Good. Now, we see, and it's understandable with an older horse, that he really doesn't want to engage the joints of his inside hind leg. And what often happens when horses do that, and you can see that happening several times, is that he drifts to the inside of the track. He drifts off of the rail. Common error that riders do is similar to what you just saw, is they try to use that indirect inside rein to hold the horse on the rail. But you can see what happens if you do that. If you use an indirect inside rein to hold the horse on the rail, all you get is head and neck in, shoulder falling out. You need to think about the fact that your reins control the front end and your legs control the hind legs. So if the horse is drifting off the rail, for example, and left shoulder in, it's because he's taking his left hind leg and stepping this way, rather than stepping this way. So you cannot correct the hind leg with the rein. So the correction to say to him with this hind leg, come on, bend this leg a little bit more, is to become active with that leg on the girth. So I want you to Hollywood this a little bit, and you can go to the left, you go head down in that direction, and start a shoulder in and let him drift to the left of the, to an inside track like he's coming on the second track, and then correct it by being active, good boy, with your inner leg to get him back on the track. Okay, understand that? So you can do that in either the walk or the trot. If you're going to do it in the walk, just trot down to that end first, or you can do the whole thing in the trot. Good. That's pretty. Now start a shoulder in and let him drift a little bit toward me. Good. And now kick him a little bit with your left leg to say, hey, bend your left hind, bend your left hind, bend your left hind. Good. Get his hindquarters in the track. That was quite good, Melissa. Try that again. Yeah. So start your shoulder in, then let him drift just a half a meter to the inside of the track. Now, active left leg gets his hindquarters back in the track. Back all the way over to the track. Good girl. Keep your hand. Yeah, super. So she keeps her hands, you can walk there. She keeps her hands over to the left while she uses an active inside leg. That was awesome. I just want to do one other thing with Val. I mentioned in the beginning of the session as a straightening exercise that we have shoulder 4 as well as shoulder in. And it's a good rider exercise as far as learning the perception of how far to take the shoulders off the track, to alternate between, for example, shoulder 4 and then increasing the angle to shoulder in and then going back to shoulder 4, knowing that you have enough control over the shoulders that when you go to straighten the horse, that he doesn't bring the shoulders all the way back to the track. So let's see, we're going to divide the long side into thirds. We will start in shoulder 4, like from F to halfway between P and B. I'll tell you as you go. You're going to increase your angle, but be ready with your inner leg so he doesn't come off the track, to shoulder in till a little bit before R. Then you're going to go back to shoulder 4 without letting him suck his shoulders all the way back to the track. You got it? So let's try that in the trot once. I'm going to start with the shoulder in. No, what did I say we were going to start with? Shoulder 4, sorry. So the horse is on 4 tracks, and the forehand is only 15 degrees to the inside. That's more than enough. Good. Now increase to shoulder in, 30 degrees. Inner leg ready. Good. And back to shoulder 4. Well done you. Don't let his shoulders go all the way back. They came back a little bit too much, Melissa. Try it once more. Start in shoulder 4. Four separate tracks. That's plenty. Now increase to shoulder in. 2 arms to the left. Good. Now carefully back to shoulder 4. Don't let him, good. Don't let him suck his shoulders into the track. Perfect. And walk and pat him and bring him up here. That was awesome. So there you have it. There's a little overview of your first advanced lateral exercise, shoulder in, where you have 10-meter bend and 30-degree angle of the forehand off the track. And basically, don't make it more complicated than it is, because shoulder in is simply the first step of a 10-meter circle that you continue on a straight line. And you evaluate, come on up here, you evaluate how much you're keeping the bend, because remember, you need that bend in order to have the engagement behind. You evaluate how good your bend is by thinking about where the hindquarters of the horse is in shoulder in or shoulder 4. Knowing that basically, absolutely, the hindquarters have to stay parallel to the track as if you were just going straight down the long side. Then we looked at several common rider errors and how to fix them, and a couple of common horse mistakes to avoid the engagement of the inside hind leg and how to fix them. And in our next session, we're going to look at hunches in, which, like I said, if you can do, all of these exercises are so closely related. If you can do a 10-meter circle, you can do shoulder in. It's just the first step of the 10-meter circle. If you can do a 10-meter circle, you can do hunches in, because it's just the last step of a 10-meter circle, continued on a straight line. So, thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Val, for demonstrating all the mistakes, because I know that you would always do it perfectly.